directly to them, so then they know that the hold that Yidden have on Eretz Yisrael is a different type of hold. It's not that they just walked in and booted somebody out, but they walked in al pi Torah, and their whole existence is only according to this amazing document which is called the divine gift, which is called the Torah, and everything of which will be according to Torah, B'meila will succeed and bring to its proper fruits. And that's what we see in our life, each and every one of us, if he examines carefully in his existence, everything has to be, if you do a thing based on Torah, and your whole approach was Torah, you see that it bears fruits. It brings to good results. And why? Because that's the way Hashem wanted the chosen people called the Yidden. That's the way they should function. You follow? So that had to be made clear when you're going over into Israel. And that's what the Ramban writes. I find that I was very taken by that Lashon in the Ramban. You know, he has this amazing way sometimes of making these sort of definitional statements that he says now the whole mitzvah of the stones, makes sense. Otherwise it's hard to understand. Why does Hashem make such an amazing nest, writing all the Torah on these stones, Shivim Lashon? It's very amazing. But Derech Agav, we see from that the Rebbe is right. That right at the very beginning, the Torah was given in a form of mivtzoim. The Torah was given in a way that you didn't just put the Torah in your pocket. Say, oh, Baruch Hashem, I got Torah, who cares? No, you made it in such a way that it was meant for the Shivim Goyim Apila. All of them. Shivim Umayt. The B'meila, the in of Pirsum, Elikus, and therefore that's the Hemshech of Avraham Avinu. And that was the whole basis of Avraham Avinu. And therefore he was the one that got the promise that to his seed would be given Eretz Yisrael. Because that's exactly what he did, Avraham Avinu. He didn't write the whole Torah on 12 stones. But what he did was he built his tent was open, from all four sides, and you could just walk in and cash in, But the Avraham Avinu had enough gevura in him to say, listen, you guys, you've cashed in, and you've had a nice meal, and you've had everything. Where do you get that in the middle of the desert? You have to pay up. So they said, well, we didn't think you were going to take money. He said, oh, no, I'm not asking for money. He said, you have to pay up with your thanks to the Creator. And so they got the idea that there really is a Creator, there is a Balabayit, L'dirazu, you follow? Or L'birazu. Avraham Avinu, he set the pace, he set the basis. So therefore, the Eibishter, the boy Rikola Oilamim, he said, are you going now to Eretz Yisrael? Let's get back to Avraham Avinu. First of all, everything's going to be according to Torah, and it's going to be Mivtoim. It's going to go out and reach all the Shivim Umayt. So now we're going to take a look at Pasuk Tes Zayin. So immediately at the completion of the mitzvah of bringing bikurim. Now that's a huge masechet that requires a lot of discussion. And the Rebbe has got about in the Dvar Malchus this week that Yidden are really the bikurim of the whole world. They're the bikurim of all the nations and all the created worlds. But I'm not going into that right now. However, after the whole mitzvah of Bikurim, and then the mitzvah of bringing your maasros and your Maaser Sheni especially to Yerushalayim, and to eat it, or to take money and buy things and benefit the poor and the Leviim and the Almonis and everything. And then what's called Vidui Maasros, you have to make a whole thankful statement to Hashem. Well, that's in Pashtus one of the connections between this passage and the passage of the Bikurim. Because in Bikurim, when you bought the Bikurim, you had to put them in front of the Mizbeah, in front of the Kohen, and then you had to make a whole Thanksgiving statement. You know, you had to say to the Eivester, you know, with a whole big arenas that you had to, and that's called Kriya Sabikurim. The same with the Maasros. You have to say to the Eivester, I've done everything you told me with the whole arenas. Yeah. And then, after that, we ask the Eivester, yeah, and Rashi brings it. No, we've done everything we're supposed to do. Now, Asinu Masha Gizato Aleinu. Asay Ata Masha Alecha Lasot. Yeah, we've done everything you decreed upon us. Now it's your turn, Kaviocho, saying to Hashem, it's your inyan now to do. Yeah, and so we ask for a big bracha, that he should bless the Yidden and Eretz Yisrael. Yeah? Good. Immediately that's finished. Then Hashem says, Hayom Hazeh, Hashem Elokecha mitzavcha לעשות את החוקים האלה ואת המשפטים ושומעת ועשיתו איתם בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך. Well, this day, so I thought the question, you know, what day are we referring to? However, he says, Hayom hazeh, the Eibester commands you to do all the chukim, how do you call it, all the mitzvahs of the Torah and the mishpatim, not only the chukim, but even the, you know, the more understandable aspects. And so comes along Rashi. Rashi said, what's this Hayom Hazeh, you know, which day? So Rashi says, Einochanami, it's not any special day, but Rashi says, B'chol Yom Yiyu Be'einecha Chodoshim. He says that every day, these mitzvahs that we're telling you that you've got to keep, he said they've got to be in your eyes as if they're new day, as if they're new. Not like as if they're new, but new. Ki'ilu boi bayoim nitztaveisa aleihem. Ki'ilu, this day, wherever you are, any time in history to come, well, on whatever day you are, or you're on that particular day, you've got to see all the mitzvahs as new, not like new, but new, and you've got to see yourself as if you're being commanded this day. You follow? This is the day that you got the tzivui from Hashem to keep them. So now that's a pretty, you know, it sounds very nice, but when you think about it, you know, that's a pretty, let's use the adjective superhuman demand, that the thing you do every day. And, I mean, you put on tefillin every day, you put on the same tefillin, except for Shabbos. And for example, a mitzvah like tzitzis, mamish, every day, including Shabbos beyond. And so, how is that going to be in your eyes, Chadoshim? And how is it you're able to look as if today you were commanded? Now Rashi says in other places a similar idea, but he uses what's called a kofa dimayon. He uses a comparing kof, and he says kachadoshim, that all the mitzvahs should be like new. Over here he doesn't say that. Here he says that they they've got to be in your eyes new. Without it, in other words, absolutely, simplicitly, and explicitly, they've got to be new, not like new. So, you know, that's important. And then look at the next posse, the next part of the posse, V'shomata v'asisa oison. And so he says, Bas koil mevochasoi, a heavenly voice blesses him. And he said, and what does the heavenly voice say to him? He said, Hevesa bikurim hayom, Tishner Lashona Habo, you will repeat and double up next year. In other words, it is a divine voice says to him, Shakoya, wonderful you bought this year, is I'm blessing you that you'll be able to double up and do exactly the same thing next year. So once again, ask yourself the question, you know, a divine voice, a bas kol, as put down in Siddur, a bas is like a born thing. So that means it's not the kol, the actual original voice, but it's like a birth off from that voice. You must in some way hear that, otherwise, what is it really? What sort of blessing is that to a guy that he's bought Bikurim? And that's a big effort to bring the Bikurim and to join in with all the other Yidden and be part of the big, you know, there was a big entourage and Besimcha Gedela Vatzum, the whole Inyan of the Bikurim. As, you know, what is the bracha you bought now? You know, Beis Hashem, you'll bring next year. If he doesn't hear that and he doesn't know anything about it, what is the point of it, you know? Elamai, we have to say that somehow or another you do hear this bas kol. Otherwise, Rashi deals only with the simple pshat in every case that he deals with. As if he says that there's a bas kol which gives you a bracha, he must mean that in some way you hear that and react to it. Otherwise, what's the point of it? You know, what's the point of saying there's a bas kol? So it's a bas kol, but he didn't hear it. Elamai, this is indicatory that there are voices, and you do hear voices, and you're not cuckoo. You hear voices, and they mamish make you the opposite of cuckoo. They make you full of energy to whatever they urge you and whatever they tell you. So I want to just sort of sum up this whole before we sort of begin talking just a little more in detail about it. And that is that Rashi L'choira is telling us here, and this is, like I said, not the first time, it's just that this is more insistent than in other places. In other places it's kachadosh. Here he leaves the kofa even out altogether. Chadosh. I want to introduce you to an idea. The Eibashter is beyond time. We live in a finite world. That's so one of the definitions of a real world. So it's brought down in Likutei Torah and Torah and Mavur Bahavi Drushek Siddur, that one of the definitional things of a world, a created world, is time and together with place. Time and place. Over the Eibashter himself, he's beyond time. In other words, even though it's written Hashem Molech, Hashem Melech, Hashem Yimlech, that's only once it's already got into Spirit of Malchus, and it's in some way relating to the creation of Hashem himself. He's completely beyond time. So it's put down in Siddur that is one of the very difficult concepts of Siddur, for a finite being in the physical world to grasp. Beyond time, something completely divorced, beyond time altogether, is very difficult for us to grasp. However, what I want to suggest is that since the whole union of Matan Torah, and beginning with the always, because they also kept Torah, the whole union of Torah links you with Hashem. Just like Hashem is beyond, as it were, time, in a similar way, the Yidden and their affairs are not according to time. So you might say, oh yes, they say they're going to call the Chasna for 6:30 and Lepoil at 8 o'clock or something. So, that's not what I'm driving at. That's also a problem, but I'm hinting at something else. What I want to suggest to you is that by Yidden, there's no such thing as past and present, and perhaps not even future. Something that happened, it might have happened, according to human understanding, X time in the past. But once that's happened, it is part and present of everything that represents your life. In other words, it's part of your present, even though it may have happened, what is according to units in time, X. You follow? Let's say Matan Torah. Matan Torah goes on the whole time. Once Matan Torah happened, it never stops happening. It never goes into the past. It's the whole time. It's happening.
Right now?
The whole time. That expresses itself in the blessings that we make every day on the Torah. Here we say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Noisein HaTorah. You follow? We don't say, oh, thanks that you gave us the Torah, but you give us the Torah. Just like you gave it at Har Sinai, that's what's happening now. And that's what the Gemara says in Masechet Brachos, that you have to learn Torah just like they did at Sinai. They were collapsing and sweating from unbelievable, hispailas at what was happening, Unfortunately, we're running out of time a little bit. But it's very important, you follow?
Beyond time, Rabbi.
We're beyond time. I don't know if the rabbi's going to listen. But anyway, what I'm trying to suggest is that a thing of that nature does not enter past. It is with you because it was brought in by Hashem to His chosen people. But it doesn't belong in the past. And it's not a beautiful emissary historical thing, but it is a living and part that happens the whole time. And kach is it with Chanukah, kach is it with Pesach, kach is it with all the inyanim. You follow? It's not a past thing, but it's there in the present. At this moment, and there's no history. In other words, there's no difference between the past and the present. It's all one inyan. Yeah, that's why in some places Rashi sort of hesitates slightly, because, that's a difficult thing to give a person to understand, that he really has no past and he has no present. Everything is just one amazing fact, So therefore he uses a kofa dimayon, he compares kachadosh. Over here, what we're holding by this every year, this comes out just before Rosh Hashanah. We're holding by, a big, day called Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and other such inyanim. There's a whole series of amazing general things that are occurring in this, like we just saw with the stones and everything. Therefore, Rashi goes out of his way to tell us that everything is chadosh, chadoshim without a kofa dimion. Mela, since that's the case, when you keep a mitzvah today, you keep it as an absolutely new thing. It really is happening like it happened at Sinai. It's not, and Rashi doesn't write things by way of, exaggeration. He's the B'derech Pshat. He's writing for a Ben Chomish L'Mikro, you know, for a boy of 5 who's just starting to learn. He can't tell him all sorts of nice ideas and, you know, what you might call concepts that are not usual. But he's telling him, you know, Pshat. Lefizeh, it comes out that there's really no past. Everything is just occurring because it was given to the Oilom, that they've joined up, and the whole union of Avraham Avinu began that they are joined up to Hashem Oilom. Yeah, that Hashem is beyond time, and it's very hard to be massing that. What he does is that everything is chodosh. It's not. There's no such thing as a past thing or an old thing. Yet therefore, Bachsidim, you know, the Alter Rebbe was in prison on Yutas Kislev. Oh yeah, Yutas Kislev. And we lived the whole thing all over again as if it was just happening now. You got the idea? And that's a chag which sort of at a certain point came in. And it's one of the famous Ramah, I think it was the Chaim Volozhin from the great literature leaders. He saw a notice where they called Yutas Kislev the Chag, HaChagim. Well, the Frierdiker Rebbe said that. And he said, by them, they're always bringing in new Chagim. He said, by us, everything just stands where it is. He said, they've always got new Chagim. Yeah. In other words, there's no such thing as an old thing. You know, God is, I just want to, before we are obliged, to bring to a siyum, the Reb Levi Yitzhak Batichera in his Sefer, the Kedushas Levi, he brings that every day you are mechuyav to literally hear Matan Torah. He said you are obliged, and he said every year has that ability. And so he said, of course, it depends a bit where you're holding and who you are, but it's good and it's proper that you should aim to hear Matan Torah. He said, because if you hear Matan Torah, then that sort of makes it very clear to you that we're not talking about the past. And he said, then it'll make sense to you what Rashi says, Chadoshim. Everything is just happening the Pam Rishayim, and that the first time, and that's what the Arizal taught us when it's written in the Megillah, Esther. It's written Vayomim Ha'elu Nishkodim V'Naasim B'chol Der V'Der B'chol Mishpocha. These days are remembered, they happen all over. Nishkodim V'Naasim. In other words, that if you just bring it into your memory, it doesn't stay in the form of memory. It becomes. Nishkodim V'Naasim. If you do have a memory and you do think, that memory causes in you that what was looked to you like a memory stops being a memory, and it's a made thing and a living thing. And the Arizal apparently said that once, but it was reported by the Ramaz. He was one of the great Mekubalim. He learned from Talmidim of the Arizal. He was an unbelievable going to Ramaz. Absolutely hard to describe. He was a Rav in Amsterdam. He was a most unbelievable leader. The Ramaz, he quotes that from the Arizal, and the Chidor, what he was one of the great Sfardic leaders, the Chidor. He was much later than the Ramaz, but he was unbelievable also. He quotes that, and he makes a whole big Indian out of it. Ayomim ha'ela nizkarim u'v'mela na'asim. So that's so. The Bhattichva says that if you somehow or another every day hear Matan Torah, even if you don't hear it mamish v'gashmi, but there's a certain aspect in you which does hear. And he said, if you accustom yourself to hearing, then it becomes very clear to you that it's happening. He said that's very, very key and important in the way you relate to everything in Yiddishkeit. And that makes what Rashi says, it becomes chadash. It's not like, kechadash, but it becomes mamish chadash. What's this union of hearing and not hearing? So that's what we're talking about here, a baskol. So it's brought down that in the Mishnah in Pirkei Ovis, in Perek Hay, says that the whole yom there's a baskol goes out from Har Sinai and says, Oy Elohim lebriois me'el v'ina shel Torah. That way is to the created people for the disgrace of the Torah. And so the Bartanur says there's not enough people learning the Torah. So the Baal Shem Tov came along, and then there's in the Zohar it's written that every day there's a baskol goes out, and it says Shuvu bonim shoivovim.